Alrighty then. I think that's working a little better. We think so, at least. Let's see how it's going to go. Let me check out my diagnostic machine over here. Hello, everyone, by the way. It's been a few months. Dun, 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 bum, bum, bum. We'll verify that we're good here going. It's not like there's anybody watching. I have such a good time with this. Things that you forget to do when you haven't done something in 2 months. Yeah, like I said, it's been a couple months since we did a show, so I think it was time. The one I started to write out a little plan for this. Looks like almost 2 weeks ago. So from 4/14 to 4/21. Oops, that's 17 days. All right. Just checking. All right. And we'll see if anybody comes by. Oh, that's great. All right. Sounds good. Okay. So, everybody, welcome once again to Escaping Dystopia. My name is Wah. This is episode 115, I believe. And we're going with. Oh, man. Can I not see? Nope. There we go. Canceling trans crypto Russians is the episode title today. Yeah, I'm way out of practice. Anyway, it's good to be back. Like I said, it's been a couple months since we did a show. A lot of stuff has happened. A lot of stuff hasn't happened. Today, we're going to be talking about a few things that I'm interested in. I've got a few links to share with you on that as well. I'll just post them here in the chat. So here's the thing that's going on today. We're going to talk about we got our topics tonight. Talk about cancel culture, the cancellingest of cultures, Spaceship Earth, some updates on the Ukraine-Russian situation, a little bit about accredited investors, Celsius. It's a service here in the U.S. for people to do crypto stuff, and also some of the airdrops regarding the above. So got a bunch of stuff to talk about, so let's get started, right? So you've seen for some reason over the last, I don't know, a couple months, few months, it's really gone quick. This has just blown up over the last couple weeks too, with this kind of libs of TikTok thing. I'm not a TikToker. I'm old and boring. But I saw a bit of the content, kind of the idea of, calling for every teacher that has come out of the closet to be fired, and some of the other just really kind of nasty attacks coming from that kind of stuff. And then across the country, you're seeing this kind of stuff all over the place. And there was a nice little high point here when the governor of Utah was talking about this. And just shared the link in there. And there was this trans kids in sports thing is something that came up for a little while because the right-wing media in this country really amplified it hugely for a little bit. And that's one of the things that our media can do, is really focus on small things or make them bigger than they are, big things that are small, and totally ignore other things. That's one of the filters that media operates as, right? That's the service that they provide, right? And I say this a lot, and I'll cover it again real quick, but every human that you've ever met, they only know, right, the stuff that they can see, hear, feel with their own five senses. Everything else that they conceive of in the universe comes through media of some sort or another. So it's all mediated by that media source, right? And the way people understand the world and build their understanding of the world is built on that. And we'll see if anybody comes by. So, that's great. Feel with their own five senses, everything else. So Just making sure on the video. It always scares me, right? That I'm talking into the void here in my basement by myself. It's always fun. So, people only have this sense of the outside world by what people hear about, what they hear through our media and through various sources and types of media, right? Media is just a word that means voice, by the way. And so this whole trans kid thing blows up, and the statement that I put out from the governor of Utah is pretty clear on when he's talking about it, and the idea of this, oh, there's people who are just claiming to be girls so they can, win at sports, and that doesn't happen. It's not a real thing that happens. And he talked about it too, and he's like, in all of our state, like this applies to like 4 children right now that are, in this state of not quite feeling exactly which gender they belong to. And by the way, and I'll go into this a little bit, the human condition is something that's real and not the most simple thing to really quickly get at. Biologically, physiologically, there is a space in our existence for folks who don't feel particularly like they are one gender or another. That's just part of the spectrum that exists for this thing. And digging into the complexities of why it's like that is a whole lot of stuff, like really, to me, quite interesting physiologically, biologically. But the notion that there are only two genders specifically, and that's just the way it is completely a human construct, passed down through the media, in a book. Usually a book, a religious book, usually is where these concepts come from. This information that humans have about our existence, unless you actually go in there and actually learn, my God, this stuff, how these cells divide, how these genes work, how this stuff all, you're talking about like protein folding and really super fast, super complex biological processes that happen, when in certain places, and then vary by species. So the trying to simplify this into God made man and God made woman, and that's just the way it is, it's really, really an unfair situation. But anyway, the governor of Salt Lake in Utah was like, flat out, this is just, there's 4 kids. And he's like, I'm going to veto this. In Kentucky, the General Assembly there overrode their very conservative governor's veto, because he pointed out that in Kentucky, it was 1 kid. 1 kid. So on a certain professional level, I can understand the questions that folks have about transgender athletes, and I'm not going to go too far into that, but there are, in completely mature human beings, some pretty extreme physiological differences having to do with years of particular hormones being, again, we have so much knowledge about the way that we work, that we can create our own hormones that naturally occur in almost all of these cases, right? And a lot of these triggers that cause hormones and cause certain things to do are, again, this goes into that human condition, extremely complex biological processes that I was referring to earlier, that literally none of the people who are outraged about this have a PhD in and study. And so everything that they know about this comes through the media. And our media now, again, is horrid, and the way that they're treating this. Now, if you're not quite understanding like how society changes to understand and how things goes, let me give you a little bit of an example. Like so I'm kind of one of, and this is not to belittle anything, but to understand, like, for a long time, society treated a certain kind of people like they were just broken, right? That they were wrong. There was something fundamentally wrong with their existence. And they were, shamed and belittled, and sometimes, beaten, or just treated as if the way they are was wrong. And eventually our society changed, and we decided, hey, these type of people, they're actually not, horrible in this case, and maybe we can just let them be and deal with it. And then they started to see skyrocketing rates of these types of people in our society. And they were like, oh, well, what's going to happen now? Is everything? Are we going to have to redesign all of society to make it work for these kind of people? And then it topped out. And it turned out that only about, like 10 to 13% of society is left-handed. And we let left-handed people, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, like, this is an example of how it's taken us and how petty and ridiculous we are. Because again, some of those books, some of those media associate people who think with the right side of their brain and use their left hands better. We're somehow sinister. Literally, that word means left-handed. It left something, I think. God, do I have to look it up? Crap. I always remember stuff sometimes. But anyway, sinister and left-handedness they're tied together. But anyway, as a society, we stopped, denigrating and trying to shame and fix these types of people whose brain were wired differently than the vast majority of society. And the rates increased, and then they topped out, and then they stopped. And now, being left-handed is not the shameful, horrible existence that some people used to try and make it out to be. And I'm not saying that it was ever in any way, shape, or form on the same level as genders, but I hope you can understand that there's some complexity in our existence. And if this media that you're hearing now, this other thing that you're hearing from somebody else, if you're hearing it live, that's great. That's why I do live shows, because live media it's a different thing. Which of course nobody's listening to, so everybody's going to hear this recorded. But it's important to understand the complexities of this and to not let these kind of small cases, for people who are dealing with something that, quite frankly, I don't think most people would like to deal with, right? To wake up in the morning and not feel like you were in the right body. And, that kind of understanding of like, oh, I think, gosh, I'd be so much better at this if you just let me use this other hand. Right? Just let them use the hand that they feel they should use. I don't see how that ever gets to me to bother in my life. And so from a moral standpoint, right, I don't understand why that is one of the axes that people tried to judge upon. So that's my bit about that. Speaking of which, Spaceship Earth, global warming continues unabated, really. We're ramping up again. Now we've got some high oil prices again. It's odd, because these are always good for fighting that, because we want to try and keep more carbon in the ground or locked up instead of in the air. Carbon in the air captures heat. And anyway, some places in the universe get really, really hot, and we don't want to be one of them. So, as far as our overall Spaceship Earth, this is a little bit of our going into our World War situation, which continues closer. We'll move right into that. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has really put the world on edge and put us, within, in many cases, a few hours of nuclear weapon use. As I've noted repeatedly, I think U.S. intelligence services has the Russians hacked left, right, and center. And I mean, Microsoft still hasn't turned off all their cloud services, and I don't know that that's not because there's a request somewhere that no, let them keep using that. We like to know what they're doing, and that's become pretty clear. Again, Russia's economy is about the size of Texas, so we'll see how they adapt here this little bit. Some of the brutality, you're hearing more of the chemical weapons kind of talk now. If we get some serious evidence of that, we'll have another change. But already Biden's been really very firm on this. By the way, Biden is a good, decent, nice guy. And one of the things that a lot of the media, I was going to talk here about a little bit about Fox and that Russian agent there, or whatever he is. I don't know what they are at this point. Tucker. What's so sad about all this right-wing stuff is these guys are all just like little cowards ultimately, and they won't talk to anyone who doesn't agree with them and won't allow any facts to penetrate. And there's a concept in psychology, it's called cognitive dissonance, and it has to do with the idea of generally dismissing facts that don't confirm to other facts that you believe to be true. The way that the human mind generally deals with these is it dismisses those other facts. the way that conservative media has approached all of this is to just not talk about stuff that they don't want people to know. And so you have this real disparity again in media sources and people understanding what the world looks like and what's going on out there. This is why I, torture myself to a certain degree and pay attention to this. You might see my smart ass stuff on there. Robot Pirate Ninja is my complete smart ass persona. So be wary. I've gotta. There's a disclaimer. It's Twitter. So we're seeing this great brutality on this. We're seeing the fallout politically in the U.S. is very odd because again, you have such a bifurcated media consumption, right? And I think there's the assumption, especially on the folks who are only in right-wing media, because that's the only thing that makes them feel good about stuff, that everybody else has a very similar, main line of getting the same stories. But that's not what's happened, right? Our right-wing media is very consolidated, talks about the same stuff. It's pretty coordinated. The corporate media is not. And so while it will talk about things in certain ways, a lot of them have much different motivations and incentives than the coordinated right-wing media, which very much pushes the same kind of stories. And we saw this all with this trans stuff. We're seeing it now in this weird disparity between what's going on. And even there was no real comeuppance. I mean, in January, you had Tucker on Fox saying, "What's up with Russia? Why does everybody not like them?" Right? And then 3 months later, Putin has revealed himself as a complete and utter mass murderer. And and it's that hasn't clicked. And so that's interesting. I see some of the pollsters. I follow what is it, the Cook Political Report, if you're familiar. If you've ever heard that term, it's the Cook guy isn't there anymore. He sold it all to Amy Walters a while back. She's just like the corporate pollster. You've seen her on all the news. The fact that folks like her and David Brooks and all this are on public television a lot should tell you a little bit about why, again, this is what I'm talking about. Like corporate media, which those guys very much are, those guys and gals, Texan. Corporate media is very much not a coordinated effort. They have all sorts of different incentives and motivations, most of which are, keep getting paid to produce content. Whereas a lot of the right-wing media, because so much of it is just funded by just grants and billions, it's a lot of it is actually nonprofit. And that's why so much more of it is not paywalled, because it's not there to generate revenue like the corporate media is. It's there to get across a viewpoint. It's there to, and this is one of the fundamental things that people don't understand about why our media system is so broken. You might say, "Oh, wow, how the hell do you know this? Why should I listen to you?" "Oh, I've got a degree in this from one of the best universities in the country. That's fucking why." Sorry. I got a degree in that, and then I learned how to code. And so anyway, so our media is very broken, and that's why, because it's a lot of it is incentivized and not by corporate profit. A lot of it has quarterly things to meet, and because of the technological changes, right, that have happened over the fact that I can broadcast this, and if I had viewers, I can have 1 million people watching it, right, and be competing with, again, all of those other corporate media systems through this other corporate mediated thing. So the whole thing has changed, right? But a lot of the people who run those old things have not changed, which you're seeing in a couple things. All right, so on to the crypto stuff. So here's the thing, right? Obviously, you can tell if you've ever listened to my show, any of the 100 whatever shows that I've done, I'm not a huge fan of Republicans. I'm going to be honest. And the reasons for that, of course, are, always ask the why, right? Why? And then watch some shows for a little bit. And a lot of and this is what I'm talking about. So a lot of right-wing media doesn't provide the information that would be useful to understand the context for why there's so much pushback against writing these bigoted laws. And that's what they are. That's what I talked about at the top of the show. And so they don't talk about it in that context. They're like, "Oh, we're protecting these people who want to just, they're trying to just sneak into their first place and beat, Tucker, your little boy there." People are just trying to be happy, just trying to live their life, just trying to find some peace and joy, and the pain of existence. Again, the human condition, folks. It's not this simple little thing. All right. So, speaking of which, folks trying to improve their own human condition. There is a term, and this is the crypto stuff. So, if you're not into that, you can wander away. If you are curious about how humans exchange value and how that's changing as much as the internet changed media, continue to listen. So, there's a concept in the United States, and this is going to be very US law based, called you have to be an accredited investor. And did I say that? No, I don't know. I could look it up. Google it. So basically it comes down to a couple main criteria. You need to be making like a couple 200 to 300 grand a year over a period of multiple years, depending on if it's single or couple, or have, a demonstrated net worth of over $1 million. And something like that, and a few other things. And you got to like follow all the laws and be a good person. Good person under the accredited investor laws. So in order to do that, and what this has happened with, there's a service you can download on your phone, all that, called Celsius. It's essentially a crypto lending service. You set up a wallet, you can send them crypto, they give you some return on that crypto, essentially by lending it out and, interest and doing financial things, right? Because of them now giving out returns, they've changed their rules that basically say, unless you are literally an accredited investor, we can't, do this. So the reason why they're trying to do all this is to, quote, protect people. That's not how it actually works, right? Because the way that we're at now, by the time a company gets to the stock market, the public IPO level, right, there is no way for anyone with small amounts of money to see a great level of return on their investment. There's no way for somebody to say, hey, I've got $1,000. I'm going to put $100 on these 10 different ideas that are out there. If one of them does, great, boom, I get 100 times my investment and I'm good to go. And one of them does crap, and one of them does 5, and I get, it's actually in an entrepreneurial capitalist society like ours, where there's massive potential, there's huge technological multiplication of effort. There is so much potential for competition for that, and so much potential for investor reward. There is. I mean, let's look at the richest people who've existed in our country's history, and that's where most of their wealth comes from. But right now we have rules that say only people who have a lot of money or are in a good shape can take the risk to invest. And part of that is because the amounts needed to do so have been so large, right? You're not talking about, hey, can I get $500 or $200 or whatever? You're talking, 50, 100, large amounts of money. And in those kind of cases, yeah, it makes sense that only people who could do that. But with a lot of the crypto stuff, you have things where you can put in $5, $10, $20 a month, $50 a week, right? $100, $200, $500. And that's real. You get real returns on that. But because of these kind of rules, all of this stuff is kind of happening outside of the SEC's purview, shall we say. And so this is one of the things where, bringing it back home to actionable intelligence, right? The Democratic Party in the US needs to get... So I'll be honest. Look, this is how honest I am with y'all, right? Because I found that, and I'll tell you real quick, and part of this is for if my kids ever, if something happens to me and like, who's my dad? I go watch all the shows. Honesty makes life easier, right? If you just only try to remember what happened, it's a lot easier than trying to make up or cover up other things that didn't happen. And it will make your mind much more peaceful. So, on that vein, I campaigned for Elizabeth Warren last election cycle. I thought she was the best candidate for president. I think she's the best problem solver, very smart. On this issue, she is ridiculously out of touch and has exposed herself as being like, okay, you're headed toward Feinstein territory and might need to retire. And it's really, really bad. Like flat out, like things that she has said in hearings on crypto and on investors and on this whole topic have been just either maliciously ignorant or just wildly ignorant, and then just not good. And to the point where one of her staffers is now suing Uniswap for, if you go read about it, it's pretty funny, but it's one of those things. Well, they did not file with the SEC, and I lost some money because it's like, why who do you work for her? What's going on here? And so there's, on the other side, there are some good Democrats working. Matt West, this guy's running. I sent him some cash a little while ago. Again, full disclosure, guys. And he's going to mint some NFTs for his thing. And those, again, are on the Democratic side. So there are some really smart Democrats, but it's not the top folks, unfortunately. This accredited investor thing is where they could actually win huge. And this is why I need to like say this and share this with some of the political folks. And maybe I'll cut this up and do some editing. Because I'm finding some people, I'm slowly, I hate Twitter. But there's some people that I've seen and connected with that I might be able to be like, hey, this is the thing you need to focus on. And it's this accredited investor rule. You need to get this out of the way so people can invest in crypto safely and get these kind of airdrops and other kind of things for investing, staking, compounding, rewarding, get in DeFi, make this legal, get behind it. Again, especially Warren, right? Going after the whole banking industry, our whole monetary system. You need to understand from the US as a country's standpoint, everybody pegging the value of their crypto to US dollars is great for us. They're not pegging them to the RMB. They're not pegging them to the euro. They're pegging them to the US dollar. That's huge. And it allows this new world de facto currency to exist on this, world internet that the US gave to us. But we can do that through the concepts of freedom that we also have championed, the freedom to transact. And this is where, again, Democrats really need to get smart, because I have to, unfortunately, give a lot of credit to a lot of the Republicans who figured this out. And I don't, know that their full motivation is there. I understand a lot of where their values lie and how that lines up. Dude, I'm painfully empathetic. Don't get me wrong on that. When I try, it hurts. Anyway, so I understand that, but at the same time, I can't get behind the whole trans fascist stuff and trying to target again these minority groups for political gain. So Democrats, please fix yourselves on this crypto issue, this accredited investor thing. This is what you need to focus on. You need to allow a legal avenue for folks to be able to do what I did this last year, which was, so there's all this other thing going on right now, and I'll talk a little about the Fortis Economia. I guess that's how you say it. I don't know. The economic fortress. I use different names. Fortis Economia. I think they're Swedish. I'm going to put this on here, right? I'm going to link to the dungeon just to scare you if you go on my page and see this. Like, what the? So I'm in, like, I do a show. I've done shows on DeFi. I, talk about this stuff. I'm working on building applications that do this kind of stuff. These folks are out there and awesome. The value for this is crashed wildly, but the only reason that I'm involved in what I'm doing here is when these things are generated, these new blockchain networks, a lot of the way that they'll entice users, bring people in is through drops and rewards, right? So you want to get people who are already invested, who are already part of this, more involved in your project. And this is the same thing that works on a much larger scale with this corporate investing class. But the power of the internet to decentralize power and then reconcentrate it is immense. And it's one of the emergent, right, properties of this network, where the more capabilities that you provide to it, the more abilities that it has. And as we've provided this value layer now to the internet, you can now create a project, spin up a blockchain, have this value get funded by a community, all through this process. And what I'm hoping that Democrats and others can do is make this legal. You'll see such a huge burst in a number of industries, like mostly like gaming, access, and media, right? These ones where we have so much of this centralized control, so much of our cable industry and all that is controlled by government regulation, the airwaves, all this stuff. I think there's ways to revitalize a lot of these things. But the way that you have to do that is through, again, well, the way that we've found to be effective is through investment and effort and using these kind of things and allowing that to all come into the light of day. On a final note on that, I like hopefully many other folks, I paid some taxes on my crypto earnings this year. I told them I made some money. I said this much is to trade, and here's some money. Cool. We'll see what happens. I'm curious how that's all gonna shake out. I think I may have screwed up on my whatever on that. Like I said, there needs to be huge, ridiculous clarity for everyone on crypto taxes. I don't think it's too hard. I think if you were to put a bounty out there for $500 million to build this, you'd get one real quick. Literally, I use tools again like ApeBoard and ApeSwap. You put in an address, you look at all the history, you can see everything that happens. All you need to do, technically, ultimately, what are your wallets? You put them in a tool. It does the analysis. This is the whole point of having these public ledgers, right? These public immutable ledgers. They are perfect for tax collection. I hate to tell everyone, but I mean, literally, you can build into the protocols themselves. So hopefully this technology will not be beaten down by stupid politics, which again, if you go back to the top of the show, now we're full circle, and hopefully we've done a bit of a sphere for you today. Stupid politics does hurt people, and it can. And if you're one of those who's immune from that, then maybe you should, Captain America and use your immunity to protect others. And with that, I shall bid you adieu. Hopefully it won't be 2 more months until we do another show. I've been doing a bunch of stuff outside of this. Like I said, I'm building a blockchain game, but that's a whole nother thing. We'll see. That's at least a year or 2 away from being interesting. This shit is complicated. But with that, I shall bid you adieu. Hope anybody thinks, yeah, I've got no followers. It's okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Got it done. Good to have it out there. You have a nice day and a good time. And try and remember that human condition. It's a lot more complex than A and B. Peace out, y'all.